Hooray! I do believe that we are live.
Yay.
Yay! Let me just make sure that we have, yep, we are good to go. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Sheba. Thank you for having me on. This is going to be fun.
Welcome. And welcome to everybody in Facebook land or YouTube land, wherever you're coming from or how you found us. This is Sheba's Spice Rack. It is a new sex talk show. And my special guest today is the one, the only, Carol Queen. She is just, I think, a pioneer, just a total pioneer of the sex positive culture in San Francisco, where I am from. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm coming to you live from St. Petersburg, Florida, which is the other Bay Area. They call it, Carol, they call it the Bay Area out here, but we know the real Bay Area. But yeah, so I was born and raised in San Francisco area, and I love Good Vibrations so much. And Carol is not only a writer, speaker, educator, activist, but she also is the staff sexologist at Good Vibrations, which is a feminist run sex shop in San Francisco and plus. Please tell us, where else outside of San Francisco is Good Vibrations located?
Well, there are a few Good Vibration stores in San Francisco, depending on which bridge you're closest to or which neighborhood you like the best. You could,
Oakland. There's Oakland.
And then there's one in Oakland and there's one in Berkeley, because we don't want those two to fight. They're too wonderful to fight, so we can't have that. And there's one in Palo Alto now. We kept our eyes open because we wanted to be somewhere near the gates of Stanford to tune in those folks to sex positive culture and products, because they will influence the world. And Santa Cruz now too, where everybody goes to have fun and be near the ocean. San Francisco is right on the ocean, but for some reason people go to Santa Cruz to be at the ocean. Whatever, it's great. And then we have also two stores in the Boston area, one in Brookline at Coolidge Corner, and one down a few blocks from the gates of Harvard, because same.
Yes, because how do you get through college without orgasms? I mean, really?
Well, I know that there have been some people who have done it, but I don't know how. So we just want to help, and we want to make sure that these ideas that we represent are introduced to people at a time in their lives when they're likely to appreciate them and find them useful. So
Yes. I know that my sexuality just exploded when I got to college. I'm sure that I'm not alone in that. And so you are the company historian, and tell me all how you are involved with Good Vibrations, because you've worked there for quite a long time, right?
Right. Well, the way you get to be a company historian at a company like this is you show up and then you never leave, and later on you wind up being there the longest of any living human. So that's how I got this part of my job. It came very naturally. I just didn't go away. I started at Good Vibrations in 1991, and I had just actually told this story last week to somebody who had never heard it before, so I'll just add it in now. I met Joni Blank, the founder of Good Vibrations, who started the company in 1977, at a Betty Dodson workshop. And for those of your listeners who might not know what I'm talking about, we're talking about a body sex masturbation workshop. And I just want to say, many of you will not want to meet your future boss at a place like that. Boundary, but for us, it turned out to be pretty perfect. And she called me up later on, a year or so later, and said, I've got a 1 day a week job at Good Vibrations. Do you want it? I was like, yes, plus give me some more days, plus I'll never leave. So that's the story.
Oh, I love that. And you are originally from Oregon, is that right?
That's right.
Is Betty also from Oregon? I feel like.
No, but Betty is, but I have a different link with Betty, which is that my dad's people are from Kansas and Betty is from Kansas.
Oh.
Yep. So there's some Kansan influence back when Kansas was a really progressive and populous state. It sails around with the winds of time and change in politics, as do many of our states, right? So, but Betty, we just lost Betty a year ago, a little bit over a year ago. I was just at her memorial in New York City a couple of weeks ago. It was amazing to have a lot of her old friends and significant people there, and you said very nice things about me in the intro, but I just want to say I also stand on the shoulders of giants. I might be some kind of pioneer, but there have been pioneers in the sex, pleasure, sex information, and sexual rights and justice space going back in time, and I salute all of them, because we all wouldn't be doing all the things we're doing, or even the people who are tuned in right now wouldn't have found you or me or anybody else if it hadn't been for this sort of this stream through history of people who needed it to be a different way in order for them to live their lives in a safe and full way. So kudos to all those brave people who showed up to help us show up.
I am so tickled to have you on the show. I'm going to honor you as a person who definitely paved the way for me as a sex educator. And, growing up in the Bay Area, Good Vibrations was my teacher, like it was a major resource for me to learn about my own sexuality and safe sex and have access to exploration. And just everybody knew that, in the Bay Area, if you want to learn some things about sex, that Good Vibrations has classes, and I always felt like you could just go into the stores and ask questions, and people there were always just open arms and so just easy to talk to. And I'm sure that I'm not alone in that. And so you guys definitely built that and paved the way for so many of us. So I thank you. And I also want to hear, from a historian, like perspective of what it was like coming into, when did you move to San Francisco and kind of start this journey for yourself? Because you have a PhD in sexology, correct?
Right.
Yeah. And did you get that in San Francisco, or did you?
I did.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's why I moved to San Francisco. Although if I look back, I was always pointed in this direction, right? I think many people who moved to San Francisco can say that, this was the place that they knew they had to go to live the life that they wanted to live. So I grew up in the sticks in Oregon. So hey, everybody out there who lives in the sticks or comes from the sticks, you can get out of there if you want, or you can stay there and change things if you want. It's, we're proof of that. But I had already done LGBTQ political activism, started I think the third gay youth group in the United States, I think, in the mid 1970s, because that's how old I am. And I was the director of my school's gay alliance. We didn't even use the terms lesbian, bisexual, transgender, etc. back then. That's how long ago it was.
Wow.
So that was already a thing that I knew that it was important to me. I didn't really see it being a career, because that was just the moment when there were starting to be professional activists, right? In the space. But HIV changed that for me. HIV was so impactful on my community, even in a relatively small queer community like Eugene had. My friends and my friends' lovers were getting sick. People were dying. I knew I had to go get trained up to do something more than I was doing. And I found out about the Institute for Advanced Study of Human Sexuality. I call it sex school, although there are a couple more sex schools out there, but this was my sex school. A quirky place, but put together by significant activists and sexologists, including the dean of students, who had been one of the assistants to Alfred Kinsey, the great
Oh, wow.
sexologist. So
That's amazing.
I had some real support and some real information surrounding me. And it was really what I needed to sort of be wrapped up in order to realize that I could step into whatever zone I might find interesting and find the historical importance in it, the cultural, socio-sexual, cultural importance in it, whatever it might be, and also the spaces for activism. Because thank you for saying that I'm an activist. I think that's the way that people who have historically been disempowered realize that their big picture options will change if they band with other people and do various kinds of activism. And that's a meaningful idea to me. And of course, we can change our own lives, one human being at a time, by getting more sex positive, by being able to talk about sexuality, by learning some things. Sex ed in school is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
right. Yeah, no, like
you were talking about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So definitely. All that. And but really, it was HIV/AIDS that brought me to the Bay Area, and I got to the Bay in the mid '80s, which was a time when it was just on fire around HIV. And I hope I never have a comparable time in my life. But on the other hand, COVID hasn't been a picnic either, and the intensity of needing to step up to something big. Some of us thrive there, and I shout out to everybody who's doing all of the activist work that needs to be done now, because there's still plenty to do.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure that there's so much that has come out of the pandemic as far as people wanting to connect and to be intimate, and it almost takes us back to, I'm a sex and intimacy coach, and that whole profession came out of the AIDS pandemic, and of people wanting to be intimate and have intimacy, but also wanting to be safe. And so I'm sure that a lot of people now are learning new ways of connecting. And I think that something beautiful that's coming out of this time is just that people have to communicate so much more now about their health. And I think I think it's necessary, and it opens people up to have those kind of conversations about, are you safe, and safe sex.
Absolutely. And it was something that people should have had access to before, who so often didn't, right? One of the things that drove me in an activist direction too was that my mom was a survivor of sexual abuse when she was a young woman and a teenager, and she never had any help with it, ever. She didn't tell my dad for decades. She really suffered alone with it. And there are so many different, you mentioned sex and intimacy coaches. My friend Stephen Brown, when I first got involved at the Institute, but also with San Francisco Sex Information, along with my partner, Robert Lawrence. Stephen Brown was one of the trainers at SVISI, and he was a sex surrogate. Yeah. A lot of people think of sex surrogates as women working with men, but there are many genders and many configurations, right? We know. And so Stephen would say, if you only have one way that you get off sexually, and safety precludes you from doing that anymore, you're in trouble. You really have an effort to make to get some semblance of sex and pleasure back in your life. If you had 129 things you like to do, it wouldn't be quite as large a loss. Yeah, you miss that one thing. There would be things that you could fill your time with and your intimate life with, nevertheless. And so whether somebody sees a sex therapist or a surrogate or a coach or a sex worker who is conscious and competent and compassionate, any of the spaces where one can learn and explore, I think they're all important spaces. And plenty of spaces, like Good Vibrations, don't involve live action in the space, sexual exploration, but the tools and information gets made available for people who want to do it solo, partnered, in small group situations, however it might be.
Yeah. And so for people that are just tuning in, feel free to, of course, drop any comments and questions you have throughout the show. But this is Carol Queen from Good Vibrations, so much more to share with her. So you were, I read that you not only have had your expert advice in Glamour and Cosmo and Marie Claire, Men's Health, Playboy, and other magazines, but that you've been a commenter on TV programs and documentaries for Sex and Culture, and that you've also been speaking at conferences as well as colleges. And do you just, I mean, is your phone just ringing off the hook all day with people wanting to just get your expert advice?
Well, since quarantine, things are starting to kick up a little bit now. There was a lull, we all kind of experienced a lull together, most of us, where we pivoted and started doing internet gigs and events and stuff. You've joined us on some of those, but also for a good amount of the time since I started doing my PhD program, there's been plenty to do, plenty of places to speak, plenty of kinds of lectures to give, plenty of kinds of classes, some with my partner Robert and some solo and some with other activists and teachers. And, it's, the pandemic really set for me the knowledge that I am truly an ambivert. I've been loving living at home with my 3 feline.
Yeah.
And
I'm embracing this like new, being at home more, being really, I don't know, I call it going deeper. We're just going deeper.
There's some balancing going on for so many of us. And even as I say that, I realize that for many, it's rough. And circumstances are rough, or just being, going deeper is rough sometimes. But let's just say for the 30 years before that, I was running on extrovert energy a lot. And even though I wrote Exhibitionism for the Shy, I named it that because I come from a place of being really shy. I always had this other side, right?
Yeah.
I was always like, I don't know what to say when somebody asks me what I like in bed or whatever. I mean, this is a while ago. I know what to say now, but also though, there was also, for so many years for me, this reticence that I could immediately switch over if it was time to stand on a chair and give a talk about gay rights.
Ooh, I love that. So
I would just jump up there and do that.
Because it comes coming from the passion place. Yeah. Just
and it covered up all of the reticence, right? And so working at the Lusty Lady, which we were talking about before we got started on our talk, my peep show alma mater, it was like the lab course to sex schools,
I loved the Lusty Lady. We're going to talk about that more. We're going to talk about that.
Quite a place, and that was the space where I allowed my exhibitionism to fly and helped cure me of my shyness, I want to say. Now it's simply introversion, extroversion, ambiversion. It's all good though. It's not like I don't know what to do in the world, because activism and exploration have taught me what to do in the world. And I wish that for everyone,
I love that. I totally relate to that. I did the vagina monologues for like I just did it recently in the right before the pandemic happened, but I did it for 10 years back to back because I was just so inspired by the movement that Eve Ensler started, the V-Day movement, and that was activism to me. That was like talking about like sexuality, talking about trauma, talking about everything. And then also the response that I would get from, like directing the play or performing in the play, and just people's response to that type of content, being presented to them. But then I took 10 years off, and I was I'm a performance artist. I'm a burlesque performer. And so that was kind of also my way of being, being a performer and being on stage and talking about the things that I'm passionate about, and also performing as a outlet for my sexuality. Totally. But I have a shy side too. People don't know this, but I have a shy side. I get very shy and timid, and it's, you have to find those passion places to speak from, for sure.
Well, I think plenty of burlesque performers have discovered that, as soon as you put a few feathers on or whatever,
Oh yeah.
there's a persona that comes out. And one of the chapters that I wrote in Exhibitionism for the Shy was about personas, because they can take you where you need to go. If you give yourself permission to get out there with some little slice of yourself and dress it up and send it out,
yes,
then the shy part of you can follow, I found. And so I don't know if that's how everybody would experience it, but I think that's an option for many people anyway.
Yes, it is definitely one of my mission statements, is to get people in fishnets and sequins and just play dress up. Please, everybody.
Play dress up. Exactly right. And I think you make a really good point when you say that burlesque is part of your activism, because I think cultural representations of sexuality and gender of all sorts,
yes,
real serious ones, real fun ones,
yes,
real sexy ones, all kinds,
oh yes,
are part of our sex education in this culture, because the top down, from the state, from the schools, education is not full education on any level, right? Unless my favorite sexologist joke is, when I go to some school or other and I'm talking of, college or wherever, and I'm saying, okay, tell me how many of you feel like you had great sex education, and a couple of people will snake their hands up in the air, and then I go, oh, okay, so those two are either Scandinavians or Unitarians, because nobody else got great
the majority, yeah.
Or maybe they went to that one school in Philadelphia that guy Al, who was in the New York Times Magazine, teaches that. Maybe they're from that class. But other than that, it's not until we get to be adults that we start to figure out where the real information is. So where do we get it? We get it from culture. We get it from rom-coms and porno and, dirty books and all the things. And so I have always, when I discovered the erotic writing of Patrick Califia in the 1980s, whose erotic writing is so smart, so incisive, so deep, so smart, I was like, this is profound information that I have not actually seen distilled in another place. And I knew from then on out that any erotic writing I did could come from the same place in me that any of the lectures or classes or teaching or activism came from. It just takes some different forms based on what kind of creative person you are. It can be so many different things.
Yeah. Did you feel like called very early on to write? Did you know that you wanted to write erotica and that you had a voice that you wanted to share?
I didn't initially know I wanted to write erotica. It was not until I was pretty full on into sexuality world that I knew that was something that I might be able to contribute. But I knew from the time I was probably 11, maybe 12 years old, that I wanted to be a writer. I knew that. And I remember I was like, well, by the time I'm 21, my first book will be out. And I'm like, that was completely unrealistic. And plus, I didn't know yet what I wanted to write about. I mean, that's the thing, right? I don't even remember who the wise person was who said, you don't write because you want to, you write because you have to.
Yeah.
You are drawn to some sort of production of something. I'm sure visual artists have that pull too, right? And performance artists. But I always knew from the time that I was sort of looking out to the world rather than looking into a little, personal world, my family, me, my class in school, whoever, what else is there? By the time I knew what else there was, writing seemed to me to be a draw that I would not ever try to resist. I journaled all through my junior high and high school years and on through college and onward. I was always writing, I was always reading, and it took a while for me to say, okay, it's time for me to try to have my byline on something now. But once I did, I mean, in the first place, having your byline on something is awesome. And if you're drawn to write, you know, that's lovely and it's inspiring. And so I just kept going.
Yes, and you have written quite some prolific books. The Sex and Pleasure book, Good Vibrations Guide to Great Sex for Everyone. Hello, like so many people, like, doesn't that make you feel just so fulfilled knowing that you've written a book that so many people are using to have better sex in their relationships?
I am so honored to have had a chance to distill, you know, the knowledge base of Good Vibrations and its reason for being and its mission, and also the stuff that I have pulled in from my own work and experiences and community affiliations. Because that's the other thing, right? One of the things that going to sex school really gave me permission to do was like, well, if there was anything I was ever curious about, now it's academic.
Yeah.
So I didn't even have to convince myself it was okay to try a bunch of stuff. I was like, it must be fun. I must learn as much as I can. And that made me feel as though community spaces that make space for us to go explore whatever it is, BDSM and kink, or you know, tantra, or anything, those places exist so that we can throw off the, you know, the shackles, the fear, the shame, the lack of information that we're burdened with. And then we can turn around and go, okay, what's the world lacking now? So my best example of this is there are two kinds of talk that are so common in our communities now, you know, where we've all either been changed by them or are grappling with them, and that's the presence of the asexual community, the ace spectrum folks.
This is real.
And gender expansion.
Yes.
And I, you know, I am that old that I'm like, well, I remember when we didn't have any of this stuff that we were talking about, you know, and that's not 100% true either.
Yeah.
Like the term asexual began to be used in the 1970s. Just nobody sent me that issue of the magazine.
Right, or nobody felt super empowered to talk about them identifying with being asexual. Because
there have been steps that needed to be taken over time, over decades, that one kind of movement and community building process opens the door for other ones. You know, the sex positive world, not that ace people cannot be sex positive, because they absolutely can.
Yes, they can.
But also, if there are people running around who think that sex positive means sex, have all the sex, which some people do appear to believe that that's what it means, I could see some people going, all right, hold on now. Just right. That's not actually my experience, and that's not my desire. And every time a door opens, another door can open, because until we get to the point where everybody feels like, okay, I've got a community, I've got a name, I've got an identity, it's cool, we're all good with each other, and that's going to be a minute before we get to that point, then this needs to continue to happen. The people step up and say, this is meaningful, but I don't find my place where I need to feel like I'm seen. And I'm just glad I lived this long. You know what? I'm glad I lived to see this. It's been so meaningful to me. It's been meaningful to our communities. People are still out there fighting about it, but that just means we have to, you know, go home at Thanksgiving and explain to everybody why it's important.
Yep, keep talking about it. Some other books that you've written, I of course want to talk about Real Live Nude Girl. I'm so obsessed and I have to buy it as soon as possible. But the Leather Daddy and the Femme, tell me about that one.
Well, the Leather Daddy and the Femme is my erotic novel And if I had a ton of spare time, I suppose I would have written some more erotic novels, but I've written stories. Eventually I'll put together a collection of other stories. But The Leather Daddy and the Femme is basically a character not completely unlike me, living and playing in a San Francisco, not completely unlike the San Francisco that I was living in the early 90s, although hardly anybody seemed to really have jobs in my novel. They really have so much more time to have sex than even the people who prioritize that, right? They could just have sex at the drop of a hat. Erotic novel, such a wonderful place to work it all out in.
Aspirational living.
And so my protagonist is a cross-dressing femme who likes to pick up leather men, and hilarity ensues, as well as lots of sex, diverse sex. I tried to make this book as diverse as I could in the moment in which I wrote it, and I'm not sure how it looks through a 25 years later lens to people who are just coming up into their own erotica preferences now, but I hope that it still carries, in addition to lots of sex, a dignity around the different characters, because that's really, I wanted to show how people weren't always either or. This was really sort of the genesis of why I participated in the book Homosexuals that I co-edited. It was this binary business. This was in the 90s, and
right.
I wasn't the only person, kvetching about the binary in the 90s. Certainly, there are plenty of genderqueer people and non-binary people who were like, "Oh, we're sick of this." But even as a bisexual person dealing with biphobia, even simply that level of identity, and I think my identity, my queerness was a little beyond that, but that was an obvious thing that I could notice that the binary made difficult, because focus on the binary is one of the things that biphobia and transphobia have in common, right? And that's what
and it stems from, I think, people just not understanding or accepting, because I remember I'm a queer woman, and my first time I got the courage to, I tell this all the time, but the first time I got the courage to go to a gay bar in the Castro, I had that moment where someone asked me, "Are you a lesbian? Are you bi?" And the word queer was not a part of my vocabulary yet. And I'm so blessed that it is now. And just to have that identity of knowing who you are. I mean, I lean towards pansexual also. And at the time it was like, I probably answered like bye, like with my shoulders up, like bye. And they were like, okay, bye. And it was immediate, like shut down. And I didn't feel like I was a part of it. It took, more of getting out and understanding and being connected to my own sexuality to even understand that, like, that's okay. And it's okay to be who I am. And it's okay to be queer. And it's okay to identify as different. And, to proudly say who you are so that other people know that it's okay too.
And showing up in a space doesn't mean that you want to have sex with everybody in the space.
Right.
For some people who have a lot of time on their hands, it might mean that, but it's getting connection with community connects for many of us queer people with sexual desire and interest, but it isn't the same thing. And I think even in this relatively enlightened community around these issues, plenty of people still make assumptions about why somebody shows up somewhere, right? Yeah. If you're at this party, you must want to, well, no, not necessarily. You have to. You talked about communication and how important it is with each other, and there are so many reasons why that's true. I mean, it's to have good, consensual, fulfilling sex with another person, much less a small group. You need to be able to communicate those things. But I think also the what you need and what you hope to get from a community connection even is part of that. I mean, when I came out as bi, I got the whole biphobia, you don't really exist, you're sitting on a fence, this, that, the other. And it was just because my young queer community was parroting what they'd heard other people say, right? People weren't even thinking through what the meaning was of saying what they were saying to me. It was just what you said.
Yeah.
But we need to be more conscious about those things, because every time we're not, we make less space for somebody else. And most of us in our community, I don't think want that. I think we want to make more space.
Yes. And we're not gonna not talk about Real Live Nude Girl. We're gonna come back to that. But
Right.
I think this is just a good moment to talk about, like, for me, like, I started a queer cabaret in Oakland. It was called Seduction Feroce. And I don't know if you know, but I used to come to you. You guys gave me, you were a sponsor. And so at my event, I would give out good vibrations, gift bags with toys and such. And that was my way of, I want to create a community of acceptance around queer culture and celebrate performance artists who identify as queer artists. And so for me, that's what I did. I'm sure for you, it has a lot to do with the amazing Center for Sex and Culture that you created with your partner. And so was that kind of like your way of like, I'm going to create the community that I want to see?
Absolutely. And partly because I was sensitive to this, you can be the wrong kind of queer in some circles. I really wanted it to be a space that could be as inclusive as possible, that people from all over our communities could know as a site that was available to them to rent for their workshops or their classes or their burlesque performances or whatever it might be. A gallery that showed all kinds of artists, a library that included all kinds of books, an archive upstairs that most people didn't ever see, but that we collected all kinds of materials from all kinds of people. And really the basic sort of knowledge that I wound up getting at the Sex Institute, which was, this is all important as we try to make sense of the role of sexuality in any given time, in any given culture. The things that people decry, porn and stuff, it's not real culture. Of course it is.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. It's what, it's what the aliens will look at when they land in their spaceship in 700 years, 7,000 years, and they pick up the pieces and they try to put the shards together and they go, what were these people doing anyway? What did it mean to them, right? You know what? Most people today can't answer that question fully. Yeah. What are we all doing? What does it mean to us? You have to be pretty ensconced in a sex positive world that invites in as much diversity as it can to start to get a beat on that, I think. And the discussions about sexuality out in the world, out in the mainstream press, out, the arguments that are being had. The mainstream press is so much more sex positive than it used to be. It's wild, so much more feminist too, so much more queer aware, but yet it doesn't go the whole way in my experience usually, because there's always a subculture emerging that's going to take a minute for people to figure out. And at the Center for Sex and Culture, we hoped that we could be a place to catch those folks and give them a space to call their own for a while too. And the center that we did have a year before the pandemic hit, we had to close that space, as I imagine because rent got too high.
Right. I mean, that's just what happened in the Bay Area. Yeah.
When you live a hey kids, let's put on a show existence, that's how it is. But the materials have gone to archives and collections, which is super exciting. And now
I love that.
Just recently, the people who run the Folsom Street Fair, who are some organized folks.
Yes, they are.
Never been to the Folsom Street Fair. There's a lot going on at that place.
I used to be on the board.
Right on. Well, they have acquired a building in San Francisco and called us up and said, oh, hey, we're saving you a room. Bring back your library. So many of the library books had already gone away, but I had that many library books practically in my hall. So I took a bunch of books over.
That must feel so good to
Oh my
have someone
goodness,
reach
it's
out to you.
amazing. It's like a the phoenix from the ashes kind of a deal. It's smaller phoenix,
Yeah.
granted, but that's okay because I don't have that much energy. I gave a lot of energy in the, in the ensuing whatever, how many 20 years or so. But the thing is, it's not quite time for us to be having a full week's worth of gigs. It'll be a little while before we gather together the way we did. I don't think it's safe yet, and we'll get there, but that'll just give us time to get more people's book collections as they decide they have to declutter their homes.
Yeah, but a place to preserve that history and to preserve that culture that was created is pretty amazing. I'm so glad that they're doing that.
Because San Francisco from the 60s, 50s, really, 40s, really, to the early 2000s. Wow, what a time, what a place.
Yes.
If people lose touch with the detail of what happened there and the kinds of changes that came out of there, that'll be a big gap in our understanding of social change and culture making and change too.
Definitely.
So to have played any kind of a role in holding down the fort there is meaningful to me, really, really meaningful.
So looking back, what was one of your favorite moments of, how many years were you running the center? It was from 94 to 2019. So.
Well, we were starting to talk about the center in 94 because Betty Dodson said, you kids should start a place. And, she was right. She was always right. Or at least talk like she was always right. So that's how you go out in the world and make people listen to you, act confident. So we got our nonprofit status from the state of California in 2000, from the feds in 2001.
Okay.
And in 2004 is when we actually found a space to rent. And from then on, pretty much consistently till 2019, early 2019, we had a space. A couple of gaps when we were in between centers, but mostly 15 years easily.
Which is a good run, I gotta say.
It's a good run, I think, yeah. And really, from in our first center, we had a full show of all four walls of our big event space covered with memorabilia from the Cockettes. That was amazing. And it was before the Cockettes documentary came out. And Rumi Misabu was just like looking around going, what is all this stuff I have in my house? I've got to get this out into the world and talk about the Cockettes again.
Yeah.
And that was such a huge, amazing thing to be surrounded by. And because, the Cockettes, I wasn't around in San Francisco and the Cockettes were at their heyday. I was a kid, but I knew about them and I was so excited. And then an extremely important time was in the mid, not quite 2010, a little before 2010, when Dorian Katz and Marlene Hober came and joined us, and Dorian made the gallery pop and sizzle, and Marlene and Dorian both, along with other people, worked on the archive, and they've been hugely important to the work that we've done. And many other people who came through, who were interns, who volunteered for a while, who volunteered for years. I mean, so many people have made this all happen, because it has been a hey kids, let's put on a show. We get tons of grants from everywhere.
Yes, and it's so important
to do it,
create space for people to attend workshops, to attend exhibits, to attend events, and to have that space to kind of create that place for education.
Exactly. And the very most important thing to me in my heart that we have done is make memorials for our sex community people who have died. Because in almost all cases, those people's families of origin are not going to invite all the rest of us and their porn fans over to the funeral. That's not going to happen. And yet people are meaningful to us, whether we were just their fans or whether we knew them in community. And we have to figure out a way to gather together and do what people do when they lose someone who is significant to them. So those times have been so important to me. And so literally, we really did try to do everything for everyone. I mean, there have been weddings there, there have been funerals there, somebody wanted to have like a kids, something. I was like, no, come on, it's not time in the universe for that.
Yeah.
It's not the right place for that. Bless you all for being sex positive parents. Remember all the boundaries, and that's a boundary.
Yeah, definitely. But what a fun thing to do with your partner also, and to create a space and chosen family, I'm sure, for real.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's really significant if you can build something with someone. You know, a lot of people's version of that is having a family, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that this is related on some level to that, but I don't know what that's like, because I've got cats, not kids.
Yeah.
Cats and interns. and it's a different way of, you know, Judy Grahn, the amazing lesbian poet, who is one of the first lesbian poets I learned about in my baby dyke years, in the 80s wrote a book called Another Mother Tongue, which looks back at history in sort of a mythopoetic way, and comes together with this basic argument that the queers are here to move society along as culture makers and change makers, to make sure that we're there to teach, to carry generations along in a different way than familial generations go. Although, of course, plenty of queers have families and have had children. So I'm not trying to distinguish those as opposites.
But to be a mother in a different way. There's so many ways to be a mother.
Nurture in a different way, to make some community, so that when the new queers come up and come out, that they're not alone. There's so many like pieces of the puzzle to this, and any of us who are doing any kind of work, whether we ever do any work with youth or not, because not everyone is called to that, not everybody can or wants to do that, but everybody is making space for the next people who come out as whoever, so that there is a little safety for them, so that there is a launching pad. And if we lose that, you know, we know how significant that a loss that would be. That's one of the things that's, you know, floating around in our political issues right now, is a kind of, you know, set of phobias that we had thought we were setting aside as a culture. We weren't. And now we know what the stakes are, and it's as important as it ever was for us to step up and make sure that we can make some community for people. It's
and
never not going to be important.
That's a big part, I think, why Joni even created Good Vibrations in the first place, is to kind of bring all the people together. And one of the things that I think is really amazing, I've got to see it with my own eyes, is the Antique Vibrator Museum that I read that, because I wasn't able to meet Joni before they passed, but I did hear that she had collected a lot of the vibrators herself, and was found them at flea markets and estate sales, and they kind of came together that way. But I remember, is it at the Polk? Was it the Polk Street?
The Polk Street store is where the whole room museum is, and all of the stores have at least a little stash of antique vibrators for people to see. The first vibrator museum that Joni put a sign up over was an antique bookshelf. It had probably had encyclopedias on it 115 years ago or something, painted black with about 6 or 8 vibrators on it. And I know how it was, you know, this big. I know that because I own it now. She gave it to me. years ago. And so I have this little piece of history in my house now. And Joni really, Joni wanted to bring good quality stuff, as good quality as she could find at a time before the, you know, the premium vibrator revolution was more than a gleam in people's eyes. The technology wasn't there yet for what we have now, but I think Joni could probably foresee it on some level. She wanted to get the best stuff, and she wanted to empower people with information and comfort in discussing said stuff and their sex lives, because those are the things that, if you give people those things, then they figure it out. They know where to look for information.
Yeah.
If they have something that is pretty good quality all the way to great quality, depending on, you know, depending on the pocketbook, depending on the shape of the thing that they want to get in the first place, all that. And you welcome people in such a way that it won't take shame and concern up. You know, so many people carry around the seeds of sexual dysfunction because they can't shake that shame. I'm not trying to blame them.
Right.
No, they're not the ones who instilled the shame in themselves.
Yes, no, and that's a big part of one of my mission statements, is just have always been a very pro exploration, pro masturbation activist. And I think that that's something that is pretty revolutionary about Good Vibrations, is just to put it out there as such a open space for people to come in and to buy toys, to find a place that you can learn about what different products are on the market. And I can't imagine what kind of scenarios happen as a docent and a curator of this museum, because some of those vibrators, they look like hair dryers, they look like medieval torture devices, but
steampunk stuff in there for sure.
At the same time, there's beauty to, you know, looking back, and, you know, that at least they were creating something with the intent of giving pleasure. And I think I read that Joni's the whole point of creating Good Vibrations is because she was doing work where you know, so many, I think 75% of women didn't have a place to find vibrators because they weren't comfortable going into traditional sex shops. And so the whole infrastructure of Good Vibrations was created to be a comfortable environment for people to come in and find vibrators and toys.
Joni was working with pre-orgasmic women's groups facilitated by feminist sex therapist Lonnie Barvak back in the 70s. And part of this group situated, it was like a consciousness raising group, but with the therapist there to kind of guide and teach and facilitate, and others, Joni being one of the supportive facilitators. And at a certain point, a few weeks in, they were like, okay, you've learned a bunch of stuff about sex now get a vibrator and go try it yourself. Because vibrators are effective little orgasm machines for many, many, many people. Not everybody likes them, but
and not just women, not just women
either. People, because we've all got some nerve endings on us that respond to vibration.
Yes.
So Joni over and over heard these women in these groups say, oh, I could never go into one of those places. You know, the ones who were afraid, the ones who thought that it was tacky or dirty, the ones who were ashamed, the ones who were scared. And Joni finally just realized, this is what I can do. This is something I can do to help change things. And wow, was she ever right? Because it was only the second woman-owned sex shop in the nation. The first one was in New York City, the second one in San Francisco, just like you'd expect. And as far as I know, the third in the world. The first one was in Germany in the early 60s.
Oh, wow.
But that's not very many. And so anyone would have an outsized effect on the people around it, right? Yeah. And Joni believed in guerrilla marketing, where you put the word out and let the winds carry it away, so that that's what the Antique Vibrator Museum was about. And also teaching people walking in the door, looking at that shelf with the sign on the top that said museum, letting them know that this wasn't a new invention.
Yeah.
They weren't being radical and cutting edge and new. Well, they were if they felt like it, but their grandmothers might have had a vibrator.
Yes.
The great grandmother might have had a vibrator. That has a different feeling than, oh, the feminists just invented these and I'm supposed to get one. It's like, well, I don't actually think the feminists did invent them, but they certainly recognized a groovy tool when they saw one. So,
I have my grandma's Joy of Sex book.
Isn't so great?
Isn't that beautiful? Like, everybody, like, orgasms are timeless. Pleasure is timeless. It goes back many, many generations. And I just, one of the things I loved about going and seeing that exhibit is just the, so many different designs and so many different styles, but all with the same intent, is to give pleasure.
And this is something that people are surprised when they learn, that they have such a long history. So I'm glad you brought the museum up, because I love it so much. And
you're still doing it though, yes? You still
doing it. And in fact, there's going to be a wonderful conference in about a month now, of sex museums. People who work in sex museums, who help create sex museums of various kinds, not just only sex museums, but sexuality in museums. And we're going to talk about the Antique Vibrator Museum at this online conference. So I'll make sure I give you the link to that so that you can share it with people, in case there are people who want to check that out. Yeah, it's going to be fun to talk about the history of the vibrators. And I'm so lucky because I've got Lynn Camella, who wrote Vibrator Nation, the history of women entrepreneurs making vibrators available in the United States, and Rachel Maines, who wrote the book about the history of vibrators.
And that's Babyland, right? Yeah.
I've got both of them on the panel with me, so it's going to be such a treat to chat with them and tell this story to people. It's going to be great fun.
Oh, I love that. That's going to be amazing. I wish I could. You please do send it to me. I want to be a part of that.
Yeah, I'll send you a few links for people who might want to noodle around and find some books or know what else, I've been up to.
Well, we're running out of time, but just to close us out, give us a little bit of the history of you and the Lusty Lady. So if you don't know, Lusty Lady was an amazing theater in San Francisco in North Beach. And I was a customer and it was lovely. I had lots of amazing empowered ladies in my life that danced there, but share a story for us of what it was like, and maybe something that you may have shared in your book, some tales.
Well, I worked at the Lusty in the very late 80s, the very early 90s. And I think the thing that was most amazing to me, the women were amazing. They were so great. But the customers, so many different fantasies, so many different ways of masturbating, so much diversity, even in this space that looked heterosexual kind of from a glance. Not even, no, much more going on than that. And my one favorite anecdote, here's one. One day, cute little apple cheek man and woman, about the same height, about the same size, walked in, sat down on the little bench in the private pleasures booth, and they were like, and they had a paper bag, and they were like, "Hi, we're from the Midwest. We just got married. This is our honeymoon." And they opened up the bag, started taking sex toys out.
Oh.
For once, I had a show put on for me as opposed to putting on the show for them. Well, I mean, of course, I played along with my pane of glass in the but that was the sweetest freaking thing. And I'm like, how did you two meet? I'm going to tell everyone. The world's going to be a better place. I never did learn that. They were too busy trying out their toys.
But they were in the scene that they were creating, which
they were so in the scene and having such a good time. And, sometimes if you're nervous to just let it loose where you are, go on vacation, especially if you can find a sex positive city and community. Woo, there you go. You got permission. All the people around you aren't going to be the people you see in the Safeway. You're
Yeah.
free.
Yes. And it was so sad that the Lusty Lady closed, but I did hear recently that there is a piece of its history going to be at another sex shop in Oakland.
I heard that too, and that's at someday we'll figure out a way to put together a little conference.
Yeah.
Alumni association.
Yeah.
Because there's a Facebook group. Hey, all my old friends from the Facebook group and people that I never met because, of course, the Lusty was around before I got there, and it was around after I left. And if anybody wants to have a wonderful little sort of mental exercise, they can just run around San Francisco or in general, anywhere they are.
Yes.
And they can go, how many of the people around me used to be sex workers?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Quite a few. And you can't always pick them out. Yep. And it's pretty great. It's mind expanding in the very best way. And in San Francisco, quite a few.
It's really a special place. I feel very lucky to that is, you know, the soil that I got to grow into a very sex positive community and culture. And thank you so much for being a part of the people who made it happen and for preserving the history, because I think it's very important. And I'm excited to hear that your center is going to be archived. And thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your amazing work and stories with us. It has been such a gift to have you on this show. And for everybody watching, you can see this on my YouTube also. And everybody, Carol Queen, thank you so much for joining us. And yes, please do let me know. Is there anything else that we can plug that is going on? I'll get the link from the conference and I'll share it with the audience, as well as you are the writer on the blog. Tell us about that.
Well, there's the blog at Good Vibrations, and then also
Show and Tell, an amazing
Show and Tell, and I pop up there, and our sister company Babeland too. We have great fun sharing our staff back and forth to do Babeland's events as well. And just speaking of writing, at some point I'm going to write a dang memoir. So I'm glad you asked me some of the questions that would, so that I would want to delve into, and before I forget all the things.
Yes.
Because there have been so many things to call out and point out and say, hey, everybody, look, this happened and it was significant. So I'm really glad to have had a chance to chat with you, Sheba. It's been great fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll definitely, I'll share anything else that's upcoming. So do stay in touch.
Right on. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks everyone for being with us.
Thank you for tuning in, and tune in next week on Sheba's Spice Rack.